Eric Laquiere is a local attorney who wants to be the next Charleston County Council member for District 3. I sit down exclusively with him for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Eric Laquiere, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Hey Quintin, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing great.
Glad to be here. It's my first interview, you know.
Oh, thank you for choosing Quintin's Close-Ups.
Yeah.
I know obviously you are a notable attorney around town, and now you are a Democratic candidate for Charleston County Council's District 3.
Yes, sir.
Which covers parts of North Charleston and Mount Pleasant. I know that you said in your website, quote, "My name is Eric Laquiere, and I'm running for Charleston County Council in District 3. I currently reside in Park Circle, North Charleston, and attend St. Joseph's Catholic Church. I was born and raised in West Ashley, where I played football, baseball, and wrestled at St. Andrews High School. I later graduated from Clemson University with a Bachelor of Science in Finance, and then went on to attend my GD from the USC. I founded the Laquiere Law Firm in 2004, and I built my business representing residents and local businesses in Charleston County." But then, why a county council?
Well, that's a good question. So, there are a series of events throughout my life that have brought me to this point. I think that probably the triggering event was, over the years, a lot of people come to me and they ask for help with various things. And a lot of times they're asking for help with problems they have with the county. And year after year, sometimes you help them and sometimes you don't. Sometimes you have to say, the law's not on your side. I agree that your situation is wrong, or perhaps it can be improved, but the law's not on your side. And how many times can you tell somebody, go talk to your council member, go talk to your legislator, call your congressman? And I finally decided that I would take a more active step and run for office.
Now, how many small businesses would you bring into District 3 if you were elected?
Well, I wouldn't bring any in. There's plenty of small businesses here in District 3. There's plenty of businesses in Charleston County. And like I said, my business is built on representing the people that are here. I wouldn't bring any companies into Charleston County on the legal side of things and representation, that sort of thing. But I would continue to represent people that are already here in Charleston County.
But of those businesses, how many would you bring, say, into the old Naval Hospital for social services?
Well, I can't say that I would bring any into the old Naval Hospital. I learned recently that there was an agreement with Charleston County and some private developers in December of 2019 where that's going to be developed as a condominiums, I believe, or something along those lines. But it's going to be developed into housing, and so that won't be used for that particular purpose anymore, although that was the original development plan.
You said this too in your website, quote, "The majority of my experience in the areas of contracts, construction, public procurement, and criminal defense. Charleston County is experiencing a period of growth unlike any time in most of our lifetimes. What in your mind is smart growth when it comes to District 3?
Well, there's a couple of things. One of the problems that we have in District 3 is that, well, I wouldn't say problem, but one of the difficulties we have in District 3 is that it's one of the only areas in Charleston where you have industry adjacent to residential areas. In most of the other parts of the county, you have commercial buffers or highway buffers or other things, and things are zoned into different regions. But in District 3, you have some areas in the Neck, Charleston, that sort of thing, where you have industry and you have residential right next to each other. And that developed out of necessity. It wasn't intended to be that way. But you also have things such as I-26 comes in. And when I-26 was installed at that location, it had to go through existing neighborhoods. And that has some negative impacts on the surrounding communities. And that is one of the areas I think we can improve on in the future, is when it comes to our new development that we're doing in the District 3 and in Charleston County at large, is to plan for those infrastructure needs in advance so that we're not putting them in where we have existing communities. Because there's a lot of negative drawbacks to that. You have a very large bug crawling up your back there. Sorry about that. But you have big problems with that. One thing that I despise is the use of eminent domain, and it's a necessity in some cases. Anytime you want to widen a road, for instance, or you want to install, everybody wants to talk about 526. So, there's going to be eminent domain required to put that in. But if at all possible, we should avoid the use of eminent domain. And that's for those of you that may not know, that's where the government condemns property against your will, private property against your will, and uses it for a public service. So good planning in the future, I think, is key to minimizing the use of eminent domain. It's key to minimizing social cost of damaging communities by putting infrastructure in after development has already occurred. I think those are some areas we can improve in.
How much eminent domain has been happening in District 3 over the past 2 years in your mind?
Well, I can't answer that as we sit here today. There are various projects that are being done, and some of those projects use eminent domain and some do not. I know that there's some talk over at Mount Pleasant, for instance, about Long Point Road extension, and that's part of that is in District 3, although that would not fall under the authority of the Charleston County Council. That falls under the authority of Mount Pleasant Town Council, so I want to distinguish that. But that discussion, for instance, would involve a great deal of eminent domain. The 526 expansion that they're talking about, that would require some eminent domain. But to get actual stats or figures on that, I would have to look at some reports that I don't have access to at this point in time.
And let me reread a portion of what you said on your website, quote, "The majority of my experience is in the area of contracts, construction, public procurement, and criminal defense." How would you vote when it comes to giving a contract to bring in a grocery store to the south end of North Charleston?
Well, I'm not opposed to grocery stores coming into North Charleston, obviously. I think that falls, I don't know that that would be a county council member vote. I think that would just be a zoning issue. If there was a request for a variance to rezone something from residential to commercial or industrial to commercial to allow for the grocery store, then that, of course, the variance request would come to county council. I'd have to look at the specifics to see where the location is and what the expected impact would be. But I'm always in favor of allowing for the use of property if it's a beneficial use and doesn't have a lot of negative effects on the community.
What specific details do you want as far as the grocery store at the corner of Rivers and McMillan?
Rivers and McMillan. What's at the corner of Rivers and McMillan now? Do you know?
Oh, it's just an open field. People call it the so-called food desert.
Okay.
Not my words.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the word food desert because it incites emotion on something that's, more of a basic needs type of situation. But I'd need to look at the specific site, but I don't see any reason why we could not have a grocery store there, and I'm certainly not opposed to it.
You talked about your criminal defense experience, obviously.
Yes, sir.
How would you help change the criminal justice reform if elected here in the county?
Well, criminal justice reform is outside of the authority of Charleston County Council. It's locally, the solicitor's office is involved, the sheriff's office is involved. So I don't know that I can do a whole lot in respect to what's traditionally called criminal justice reform. A lot of that would have to be done at the state level with the state legislature. When it comes to local ordinances, we do have some local ordinances here in Charleston County that are criminal in nature, and those are things that we can certainly look at, but they're more in the realm of permitting violations and license violations and that sort of stuff, but they're not in the realm of what you're generally discussing when you say criminal justice reform, which is different sentencing options for, say, minor drug offenses or nonviolent offenses or that sort of thing. Maybe getting rid of the mandatory minimum sentences for repeat offenders is one thing that's often discussed, but that would all be outside of the authority of county council. It's not something we would be able to have control over.
How would you work with the Charleston Area Justice Ministry?
I have to confess that I am not familiar with the Charleston Area Justice Ministry, and that would be something I need to look into and meet the people that are involved in that.
You also said this quote on your website, "This is a great thing in many ways. It means opportunities for everyone in the community. But growth is obviously accompanied by complications, increased traffic, greater infrastructure needs, as you just mentioned, overcrowding, increased government bureaucracy, and less access to your government officials." What's complicating District 3 right now, Eric?
Well, I think that one of the most important things about your local government is access to your local government. And I think that the people in the community need to have access to their elected officials. That's one of the things that I do is on all my campaign materials, I publish my personal cell phone number as well as how to access me by Facebook Messenger and other things. And anyone is welcome to call me in the evenings, send me a text, ask me to call them back. I've had quite a few people who have done that actually. Had some very good discussions with people, learned a lot about what's needed in the community. But I think access is one of the most important things that we lose with growth. Is you lose that small town feel, that ability to run down the street, knock on your councilman's door and say, hey, I've got an issue, and I want to change that. I want to make us more accessible. Another thing is that with growth, you have more traffic, you have more flooding problems, you have the traditional things that everyone discusses. And I think that those things are best alleviated through good planning ahead of time, and more attention to the details. Flooding is something that people talk about a lot, and that is covered oftentimes by poor maintenance. You have drainage systems that are installed that need to be maintained a little bit better, and that's one of the things that gets overlooked a lot of times when you're looking at what the county's operations are. So there's various things that we can do.
How many drainage improvement projects are needed for District 3?
Well, I would need to look at some studies, to be honest with you. I can't tell you as I sit here, but I can tell you this. Every single location that has a flooding problem, water collection problem, is a separate, independent affair. What is needed over in Park Circle is different than the solution that's needed out in the neck, which is different than the solution that's needed in the portions of District 3 that are here downtown, and they're very different than the problems we have up there in Mount Pleasant around the City Farm area. I mean, each one has its own independent problem, its own independent cause, and its own independent solution. I don't know that you're ever going to become 100% successful when you have portions of Charleston that are 10, 12 feet below sea level. But there are things we can do to try and minimize the impact. And if you have an already developed area, obviously proper maintenance is the key. If you have an area that hasn't been developed yet, you need to do more than fill in the swamp and put houses there. You need to plan for it a little bit better.
Is District 3 ideal for fill and bill?
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the term fill and bill.
Oh, well, you're not?
I don't know the term.
Okay. What is your comprehensive plan for, obviously, connectivity for District 3?
Connectivity? You mean communication networks?
As far as building bicycle lanes and, things like that.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, so non-vehicular traffic.
Okay.
Is that what we're looking at? I don't have a specific plan. Now, I have seen some things that have some interesting possibilities. I saw a proposal recently where a large portion of the neck area of Charleston would be turned into a park with a long, skinny park, basically, to provide some green space out there in what's otherwise an industrial area.
Sure.
That's an interesting proposal. I don't know where that stands or what the details of it are, but I did see it's the same bug.
Oh, God. Pardon me, folks.
But I did see a proposal along those lines. There's lots of possibilities, but anytime you look to add that, I know over in District 6 along Beast Ferry Road, right, they added the sidewalks along Beast Ferry Road.
Right.
And that has a couple of benefits. It allows you to get from neighborhood to neighborhood by bicycle safely for children and such.
Right.
And it allows for growth later on when that road needs to be widened. Then you already have the space, so you don't have to do the eminent domain later on.
Okay.
So that's an example of where you can have that sort of, as you call it, connectivity that can be used now and then can be converted later. So there's lots of possibilities.
Let me turn to health. Many people say there are health issues in District 3 when it comes to underlying illnesses, and obviously we have COVID-19. Mm-hmm. What are the underlying illnesses in District 3 as you know it?
Well, I would say that they're probably about the same as they are everywhere else in Charleston or in the local community. Good health, it's a complicated issue. I mean, you have every person has their own individual needs. They have different lifestyles. I think what you need to have is access to care. And once again, that's a private industry thing. That's something that falls outside of the constraints of what Charleston County Council can do, except for providing your emergency response. And we do have some EMS service and fire and police and that sort of thing. But as far as Charleston County Council goes, health care is not something that is directly involved in.
Let me turn to something else you also said, quote, I have represented residents who just seem to be overlooked because their small project or individual concerns were not important enough. Has affordable housing been overlooked in your mind when it comes to District 3?
Well, that wasn't what I was referring to in that statement, but I will say affordable housing, it is a problem that accompanies growth. Okay, so anytime you have increasing property values based on the laws of supply and demand,
right.
Okay, then when you have a town center, say downtown Charleston, or a town center around the Park Circle area of North Charleston, or various areas of Mount Pleasant, then people want to be near those services. They want to be near those facilities. And so the land around that increases in value based on demand. And if you don't have enough town centers in an area, then everybody has to travel who works in the hub. They have to travel from farther and farther and farther out. Right. Into the suburban sprawl, we call it, okay? Because the least expensive property is the property that's on the outskirts. And so it's a problem that faces every developing city or municipal area. And it's something you have to take a serious look at. Now, Charleston County, once again, Charleston County Council and Charleston County government is not directly involved in the housing business, okay? And this, I've been asked this a few times. The Charleston Housing Authority is to some extent, but they are completely separate from Charleston County government. They're a separate entity, separate people govern them, and separate funding as well. I would like to see us do a better job of managing the affordable housing we have in the community. I'd like to see more variation in some of our zoning options to allow for the higher density housing in some of the town hubs. But like I said, I don't think that Charleston County needs to be in the business of building and managing housing. It's not set up to do that.
What are the zoning options right now for District 3?
Okay, well, there's anytime you have a project, you're gonna look at what the zoning for that particular piece of land is, and there's a zoning plan. They have what's called a comprehensive zoning plan, right. And it was developed a few years ago. It was created by Charleston County in conjunction with the municipalities, and it's mandatory based on state law at this point. It didn't used to be, and so it puts forth the basic plan, what zoning is going to be where. And you can get variances from that if you apply for a variance for right. a special project. And sometimes what we need to do is be more accommodating when it comes to granting those variances.
This is a complicated question I've asked, and some people have struggled with it, but it's obviously I have to ask.
Okay.
And you probably might say it's out of the county council's hand again. But what tax credit would you ask the county regards for affordable housing?
All right, I'm going to struggle with this one.
Okay.
I have not looked into the implications of a tax credit relating to affordable housing. On the subject of taxes, though, I can tell you that when I left for college, I graduated high school, went off to college a long time ago. Our sales tax was right around, I think it was 5%, had just been raised by 1 up to 6% or something in that range. And now we're at 9, I believe, in the county, and some of the municipality areas are 10 or 11, depending upon which one you live in. And so we have seen over the years a rise in our sales tax, and we've seen a rise in some of our millages on our property taxes. I would like to see us stop raising our taxes. I would like to see us plan better for the infrastructure projects, capital improvement projects we need, so that we're not consistently doing new bond referendums. Every time we need a highway, every time we need a school, and this goes for Charleston County School District, Charleston County, the cities as well.
Sure.
It seems like every time we have a emergency project, we're doing a new bond referendum, and I think that we could perhaps alleviate that by having the county government focus on doing a few things really well, and instead of trying to solve everything in the community, maybe do a few things really well and reprioritize some of the uses of our funds so that we'll have the availability to do things.
What are the capital improvement projects in District 3?
Well, I looked at a report yesterday, and the library project is a countywide project that's going on right now.
Sure.
There are some projects on the 4-year look ahead, starting in I think is 2019 to 2024. They're doing some work at the Juvenile Detention Center,
Sure.
at the Charleston County Detention Center. There's a new fire station in Allendale.
Right.
There's a few others. Of course, there's the big one that everybody keeps talking about, was the 526 expansion that was voted, I think, July or August of last year. County Council voted to utilize some of the sales tax proceeds to fund their portion of that. I know that that's an ongoing thing. But excluding 526, I think the projection was $248 million of capital improvements between now and 2024.
You talk about 526 and obviously the expansion right there at West Ashland and the Islands. What did the taxpayers in your mind agree to, and what didn't the taxpayers agree to in your mind when you look at that?
Yeah, a lot of people are up in arms about that, and I'm going to punt a little bit on this, and I'm going to tell you why.
Okay.
I wasn't a party to putting that referendum together, and I wasn't a party to the vote last year in 2019 when County Council said we're going to use the funds for this other purpose. And I've spoken with a lot of people with differing opinions on this. In fact, I had a very nice phone call with a gentleman 2 weeks ago about this subject for almost an hour.
Wow.
And he was very, very opposed to the use of those funds for the 526 project. And as I explained to him, I'm not running for office to try and repeal every decision that was made before my tenure. What I'm running for office for is to try and improve the decisions going forward.
What decision would you improve going forward with 526?
Well, I wouldn't get into the mix, and the reason is that the project is already on track at this point. It's already been voted by my predecessors. Have already voted to go forward with that project and use certain funds allocated. Some people would say for another purpose, for that purpose. So I'm going to stay out of that mess, and what I'm going to do is focus on other projects that we need going forward. I'd like to see us reprioritize some of the use of our funds. That's going to require some study and some work, so please don't ask me to tell you which areas I'm going to take money from and which areas I'm going to give it to.
You all are running for office. I got to ask these questions. These questions.
Of course, but that's not something that I get to do unilaterally. That's something that we have 2,800 employees with the county that put together a plan. And then as county council, we vote on the plan. Do we approve the plan? Do we disapprove the plan? Do we ask them to change parts of the plan? By way of example, I was speaking with a couple of the different county council members that are in office today. Last week I was talking with them on the phone about what their plans for the budget is going to be, considering the loss of tax income from coronavirus. We had the shutdown. We're going to lose a large portion of the sales tax income this year. As you know, the budget that they have prepared for operations, $580 million a year. And when you lose over $100 million, perhaps close to $200 million in your tax revenue for a year, how do you accommodate that? And the answer I received is they are working real hard to see where they can make some temporary reductions, and we're expecting to have a meeting with them on June the 2nd. And so, as this example shows, it's not one council member can't unilaterally make drastic change. It requires majority vote of all 9, and it requires preparation and the implementation of a plan that we get to vote yes or no on. But we don't just make decisions and make it happen. So it's a little bit more complex than that.
How much tax revenue has District 3 lost over the past 4 years?
I have no idea. That would require me to pull up some reports and look at that information before I could answer that question.
Let me turn to widening of 526. What in your mind should be the preferred alternative for that?
The preferred alternative to 526, you're talking about the extension to Johns Island?
No, the widening of 526.
Oh, the widening, okay. I know that there is a plan that's being developed in the North Charleston area where the interchange of 26 and 526 is, right, for an extension of 26 with a different merging area for the 526-26 interchange. That's handled by the Department of Transportation, not by County Council, and I'm not privy to all those details at this time.
Where in your mind and in the budget should the money come from as far as widening Long Point Road?
Well, that's a Mount Pleasant project. and I would hope that Mount Pleasant has a plan to pay for that if they choose to go forward with it. As I said before, I'm not a big fan of using eminent domain in existing residential neighborhoods and developed communities, previously developed communities, and that would require a substantial amount of eminent domain to accomplish that.
Okay.
And it would have some pretty extensive costs as well. But like I said, that's a town of Mount Pleasant problem. I'm not running for that particular office. I'll leave that to their elected officials.
How would you work with the town of Mount Pleasant to make certain that this is widening?
I don't think that would be in my authority to do so as a county council member, because that would fall within the realms of the town of Mount Pleasant's authority.
Let me turn to quality of life. What is it in District 3?
Quality of life. Well, I live over there, and I think the quality of life is pretty good. There are, like any part of the county, there are areas where you have some problems with crime, and there are some areas where that need a little bit of rejuvenation, we might say. But I think the quality of life is pretty good. I really enjoy living in District 3.
How would you protect the tax dollars for District 3?
Well, as I said before, it's not entirely my decision on how those tax monies are spent, even if I'm elected. However, I would like to see the county, as I said before, run a little more efficiently. I'd like to see them do a few things really well rather than a whole lot of things pretty well. And so I would try to prioritize the things that really focus on safety and infrastructure and spend most of our money in those areas, safety and infrastructure.
How much money does District 3 need right now for infrastructure?
Well, it depends who you ask, and it depends how many projects you take on. So currently we have, if pre-coronavirus, I'm going to use pre-coronavirus numbers because I don't have any reports on what the actual budget's going to look like beyond June of this year. But if you're working from projections pre-coronavirus, $570 to $600 million a year is the Charleston County budget, and that includes operations, and that includes maintenance, and that includes annual money going towards your capital improvements. They use bond referendums in order to fund capital improvements, and then they use the general budget to pay interest and to gradually pay down the principal. Right now, I think we're paying around, and don't quote me on this, I'm going from memory, I think we're paying around $70 million a year in carrying costs on debt. And I think we have around $30 to $35 million a year without bond referendums towards capital projects and such. But I'm going from memory, so I may be wrong on those numbers.
Eric Laquiere, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. Look forward to talking to you again.
I'll be here.